Welcome. This seminar is called The Future Called. Work from anywhere is the new normal and you're not ready. Now, I understand that that's challenging, and I understand that you probably think you are ready and that we're going to go to the old normal at some point. But I don't think so. Things have changed, and we're going to talk about what's changed and why we need to be looking at other things real soon. My name is Ed Joris. I am an Apple Business Development Specialist for CDW, and part of my job is to look forward so that the company I work for is ready for trends before they happen. So we've been looking at all this stuff. We've been doing the research. We've been playing some games and gaming out scenarios and taking things to their logical conclusions. And I hope when you're done with this, that you will do the same thing and that you will see the value in trying to anticipate issues before they crop up. So let's talk about this. I've taken to calling March 2020 as March Madness, and that the crisis that happened to everybody spawned a great migration. And we'll talk about all of that. And then we'll talk about why the old normal isn't coming back again and what else happened outside the world of managed devices, Jamf, and user management that is important and is going to have an impact on your daily life in the world of IT. We'll also introduce something called SUWYWT and what it is and why you should care. And then we'll wrap up with what IT has to be ready for along the lines of business travel and events, and why if you're not thinking about your company's travel policies, you may get bitten in the butt by a few things. So let's start with March Madness. People are under the impression that March Madness was canceled. And the NCAA March Madness didn't happen, but there was madness, and it was in March. It just took a vastly different form. Lots of things happened, but for anyone in mobile device management or user support, it was all run and gun in fast forward mode, 24 hours a day. Things that should have taken 2 years happened in 2 weeks. Desktop computers quickly became doorstops, and everyone had to confront the reality of empty office buildings and remote access for everyone. Now, the other thing to remember is that when you left your office, like when I left mine, we all thought this was temporary. I know at CDW, we left on March 11th, I believe, and we were under the impression that we were going to be back in the office by the first week in April. Well, it's the end of September, and I know in our case, we're not coming back until the beginning of January, if then. And we're going to talk about what that change means and how temporary becomes permanent and what that means for you. So let's look at what happened. We didn't have any games, but think of this as a March Madness scoreboard. And what this is this is from McKinsey and Company, and before is March 1st, 2020, and it's a survey of their clients. And it's the percentage of how many people in these kinds of business slots worked from home. So IT was actually the highest percentage. 9% of IT people in corporate America worked from home. Everybody else, it was something less than that. And then after, which is April 1st, by April 1st, 84% of IT professionals were working from home. For other professionals in business, it was 74%. For financial professionals, it was 70%. For manufacturing, it was 61%. And for education and health, it was kind of low. It was 36%. Now, a large part of that is that they lump education and health together Education, clearly that number was much higher than 36%. Health, it was probably much lower because most healthcare workers were called in to work and take care of the actual disaster. So then we want to talk about what's going to happen after, right? We want to know what is going to be the issues that we're going to run into after we come back to some kind of normal. Well, to get there, especially regarding work from home, it's worth looking at why we did not have work from home on a larger scale before the crisis. And it's really interesting to look at some of this research and look at the facts. And if you want the research, you can either send me an email or I will attach notes at the end of the handouts. I was one of the few people who worked from home before the crisis. In fact, I worked remotely and managed a staff of remote workers for 5 years before the crisis. It was out of necessity because all of us were spread out all across the United States. There was no two people in our team that worked in the same office. And a full disclosure, as part of that experience, I became a really big backer of work from home. So I've always known the business case for work from home has been really strong, okay? So 80% of workers wanted the option to work from home before the crisis. Only 5% worked full time. The business case has always been really, really strong for anybody who took the time to look. Staff is more productive. People, companies save money, and there's no faster way to reduce the corporation's carbon footprint than to institute some kind of work from home or work from anywhere program. This all begs the question of why it never caught on. If this is all true, and it is, why weren't more people working from home before March 10th and 11th? It turns out there's a really easy answer to this. And that is that middle managers in corporations across the globe formed a dam that held this work from home flood water back. In short, managers didn't trust staff, okay? They wanted to be able to walk over to someone's cubicle and see that they were working. And they wanted the option to drag them into the office for encouragement anytime it was needed. They thought employees would take advantage if they were allowed to work from home. And they didn't see any reason to change. Now, the other thing that's interesting is a lot of people had like a Friday, every other Friday they can work from home, or one day a week you can work from home. And that's probably the least productive way to do that, because employees in that kind of situation see it as a day off and they don't get anything done. Now, what the pandemic did is it broke through the dam because it forced managers to try work from home. And you know what? Most of them liked it. Working from the backyard on a sunny afternoon is a pretty good gig. And I don't care how big a fan you are of audiobooks, no one likes commuting. So there's good news for you. Because you're here, because you're at the Jamf Nation User Conference, I'm pretty sure that Apple and Jamf made the migration easier for you, okay? Zero Touch was made for a crisis like this. And partners like CDW and other vendors can take care of the actual logistics. It's what we do. And we at CDW did very well in March and April, and thank you very much. Okay? Now, what you have to confront was this luck? Was your choice of, did your choice of tools and platform just turn out well at this time? Okay? And it probably did. But if we're just looking at work from home and user support, in a Jamf Apple environment, you may not have seen or felt the other tremors that were going through the IT business and the aftershocks that will be felt in your area and in other areas. Now, I could have used the tip of the iceberg metaphor here, but I chose for a reason to use a calving glacier, because when you see an iceberg calve from a glacier, there is no guessing about what lies beneath the surface of the resulting iceberg. You've seen it. You've been there at the birth. And oh, by the way, if you have not ever witnessed this, you need to. There is just no substitute. This is breathtaking. And getting back to the metaphor, if you get there at the birth of an iceberg, you know what you're dealing with. You know what's under the surface. You can anticipate, and anticipate is a key word here, what's under the surface. You don't have to wonder. So let's talk about the world of IT outside mobile device management, Jamf, Apple, users, etc. Lots of other stuff happened during the crisis. The crisis spurred what I would consider an unprecedented acceleration of bold, integrated strategies that led to some incredibly effective transformations. We are all taking these things for granted already, okay? Banks went completely digital. Healthcare providers rapidly moved into telehealth. I had my first telehealth appointment and immediately wondered, why haven't we been doing this? Insurance dove into self-service claims. Retailers moved into contactless shopping, pickup, and delivery. And you have to wonder, how did they do that? Well, they anticipated the need and they pressed the accelerator pedal. Telehealth is particularly instructive, okay? If you look at telehealth, it's like work from home. It made all kinds of sense. And it's one of those things that once you've experienced, you wonder, why haven't we been doing this for years? Well, it had the same kind of dam holding it back. In this case, it was the fact that the insurance companies hadn't figured out how to bill for it and doctors hadn't figured out how to bill for it, and insurance companies hadn't figured out how to pay doctors for it. Not to mention that nobody knew how to keep records. There was no box to check for telehealth in the HIPAA forms. The crisis made people work through that because going with the way things were was not an option. Now, what I want to talk about is anticipation. And I'm going to use another metaphor. And those of you who follow the English Premier League or other high-level soccer should recognize this man. This is Mike Dean, the head referee of the English Premier League. In his world, out on the field, he is expected to be in position to make calls anywhere on the field all the time. For those of you who have played soccer, or those of you like me who have refereed, you know how big a soccer field is. A soccer field is bigger than a football field. It is basically 120 yards one way and 80 yards the other. Okay? There's a lot of ground to cover, and if you're not in position, there's no excuses. Mike Dean is 20 to 30 years older than most of the players. He's not slow, but he's considerably slower than almost all of them. So how does he get into position? Informed anticipation. A good referee scouts the teams, internalizes their habits. During the game, he knows where the play is going and has a head start on being in position. He uses his brain to anticipate events. Okay? It's a skill. Anticipation for soccer referees in particular is a skill. It can be learned. And my advice to you is that skill has to be learned by you soon. Business is going to require anticipation. The accelerated innovation during the crisis benefited businesses that were agile and knew what was coming or could recognize it quickly. This is not going to change. The marketplace will continue to value agility and innovation above all else. And this has several consequences. Technology can't be separate from business. Business concerns and IT concerns must merge. IT must anticipate business needs. Ticket-driven processes and reactive fixes won't cut it. IT must think in terms of days and weeks for project, not months and years. We have to anticipate the need. IT cannot be reactive and wait to be told what to do by management. Those days are gone. No one is going to let you slow down once they've seen how fast you can move. Another message from the future is what the core principles are going to be. Okay, taken overall, what business and IT learned from the crisis is that there is no substitute for flexibility and speed of innovation. Anticipation is a necessary part of every job in business and in IT and everywhere. The speed at which the change hit is what caught everyone off guard. Reliable entrenched systems that we know and love and processes are no match for fluidity and no match for the ability to adjust on the fly. Quick action with understanding of the risks is going to be key. And that's going to mean that business is going to have to accept that IT quick changes are going to come with some risk. Okay. Similarly, businesses and IT must understand that silos hinder innovation. And if you're wondering what that picture is, it's a silo being dismantled. Okay. We can't have security separate from infrastructure, separate from end user support. And we can't not have business separate from technology as a whole. Teams that are planning business processes must be users, management, and technology all together. I'll give you an example of cybersecurity. Okay. Work from home and work from anywhere is going to require a complete rethink of cybersecurity. The landscape has changed. It used to be that we had hardened buildings and hardened infrastructure and hardened business practices as a whole. Now, what happened was that we took all those people who work from home. They all became targets the minute that happened. There's a 700% increase in spear phishing attacks, and that wasn't an accident. Okay? What we have to think in terms of is hardened users and hardened user practices, because they will always be the most weak link in any security chain. We need to find a new balance. Does the remote security regime make remote users less productive? We can't have that. Okay, so for example, SSO and MFA is something that we require in remote user management and procedures. We have to think about how that works. Is that something that the users are is going to hinder the user's productivity? If it is, then we can't have it, and we have to look for something else. Another thing to think about is cloud native platforms, because they're all designed to use SSO and MFA. It's hard to work those into legacy systems. Okay. Right now, the default to get by is to use Citrix for everything or something similar. Well, users really hate using Citrix like that. I don't know if you know that. And it's time to start looking at legacy systems. The workplace of the future is anywhere. Work from anywhere will increase at least 700%. Everything that we see is to expect 25 to 35% of office workers to remain home forever. Okay? Offices as places where everyone works together are dead. On-demand resources are going to replace cubicle farms with assigned seating. So instead of an office with cubicles and everybody living there 9 to 5 or 8 to 10, we're going to have resources where people can come when they need to. Hence the new paradigm. SUWYWT. Show up when you want to or when you need to. This is something that's being discussed in corporate hallways or in corporate Zoom meetings or corporate WebEx meetings everywhere. So the first thing that you need to do is talk to management at the company outside IT and make sure you know how is the company handling return to work. This is the first test of informed anticipation, okay? You better know what your company's plans are. Don't wait to be told. When this settles out, a large group of users are not coming back to the office ever. Okay? You'll have at least 5 times as many remote users as you had before. You just have to assume that in your planning for everything. And part of the consequence of that is everything has to scale up. Okay? To support work from home, every remote work tool must be designed to scale easily. Okay? Plan for replacing anything that can't scale. Identity management, security, any system that is device-based and not user-based, because users will use more than one device. It's not enough to harden their company laptop. This will involve a long, hard look at internal legacy systems. How do you make something more available than it was designed to be? VPN may be the short-term answer, but what's the best long-term answer? Do we need to migrate to a business system that is designed from the ground up to be scaled and shared? I know that's going to be a hard pill to swallow. Everybody has legacy systems that don't scale well and aren't made to be accessed from outside the building. Well, we can't design our work around a legacy system. It doesn't work and it won't scale. You also have to look in the mirror and say, are you really ready for SUWYWT? For show up when you want to? And think about all of your standard employee processes. What needs to change? Don't underestimate the number of procedures that will need to change, especially in user support. If your company furloughed a lot of people, are you bringing them back? How are you bringing them back? What's the process? Any process that depends on being in the office must be reviewed and updated. As I mentioned, I worked from home for a long time. And I found out the hard way that we had no procedure for firing a remote employee. And when myself and some of my team members were let go, they didn't know what to do. The system, such as it was based on a face-to-face meeting in someone's office. You called someone into their office, had security go over to their cubicle, and you gave them the bad news. You asked them for their credit card. You asked them for their keys. You asked them for their ID. Security took their computer and then escorted them out of the building. That doesn't work when the people doing the firing are in Maryland and the person being fired is in Pittsburgh. I know, I've been there. And if it were any other kind of employee who wanted to do more damage, it could have turned out a lot worse. Another thing you need to remember to be prepared for is dispersion, okay? As soon as your company sanctions work from anywhere as a long-term strategy, employees are going to begin to disperse, just like the dandelion in the picture, okay? Most of your workforce now is still within commuting distance of an office. When work from anywhere becomes normal, employees will begin dispersing, Okay. Procedures need to account for this. How do you hire somebody who is remote? How do you manage them? How do you onboard them? Another thing you should look at is how well people are functioning at home now. Work from home works, but does it flow? At Bug Out, everybody was running quickly. If you remember the TV series or movie MASH, you are familiar with the term bug out. When the tide of battle turned, the field hospital had to be moved. That's how I view what happened in mid-March. We all bugged out, and like a MASH, we were set up and operating literally relatively quickly. But few people were as effective at home as they were in the office. And this is kind of okay because we thought we were going to be gone for 2 or 3 weeks and it was temporary. Now that it's more or less permanent, a lot of people don't have the tools they need to be as effective as they were in the office. Okay. Another thing you should look at is, what is your collaboration strategy? In work from anywhere, collaboration is critical. The tools have to be easy, intuitive, and useful. Don't choose a tool because it came with your productivity suite. If your users can't use it or won't use it, you'll hear about it, or it'll cause you problems. You may now have remote or rogue groups of users who are using something else. Eventually, this is going to come back to bite you in the butt. Okay? You need to find out if they're not using this tool that you sanction. Why aren't they? Is it a training issue? Is it awareness? Is it laziness? Most likely, it just doesn't fit what they do. The other thing to remember is deploying computers is easy, and that's pretty much all we've been doing. What about the other stuff? And you can look at this and you can say, well, why do I care? Why do I care about office supplies, printers and supplies, and chairs and other things? Well, if you're in the office, I would go look at a cubicle and look at everything that's in the cubicle and ask, why is this here? Followed by, should we be getting these for our work from anywhere folks? At some point, company management decided that the company needed to provide all of this stuff in the office. What consequences are there going to be for not providing it at home? For example, something cheap and simple like a USB keyboard and a mouse could save a lot of laptop wear and tear on trackpads. That's why we give them out. Second monitors are another popular option, as are docks. And you should ask someone in your company about chairs. If there was a good reason for the company to spend good money on chairs in the office, that reason probably exists for getting people chairs at home or wherever they want to work. Ask about travel policies. This is another one where you're going to say, I've got nothing to do with travel. IT people don't travel. Here's the thing. CFOs know what can be done without face-to-face meetings. Travel budgets are not going up anytime soon, okay? Informed anticipation would suggest you consider being ready for a remote meeting arms race. Assume that someone in your leadership might be blown away by something he or she sees online, and they're going to come back to you and say, I want to do that. How do I do that? What do I need? And then you're going to be reactively researching prosumer cameras, mics, making sure the boss has a computer with processing power to match. Consider creating a new class of users, power presenters, where they can have all these tools. Parting shots. Get to know your company's business. Get to know what your users do for a living. Look under rocks that you've never wanted to look under before, because that's what you're going to find, the things that need attention. Don't wait for trouble tickets. You need to learn to anticipate needs and be ready for them. Finally, because everything has been speeded up, don't expect anything to be gradual. There's not going to be a gradual shakeout. One day, things will be different, and you're going to wonder, how did this happen? Don't be in that position. Know what needs to happen and get it done. Thanks for paying attention, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the presentations.